I should know this by now. How common is that for doctors?
Oh my God, like what did I just do? And answering that question, I was rambling. I felt like I confabulated. It was so out of my integrity.
And a really big part of people pleasing that I identify as part of the problem is actually lying. We tell ourselves that the lie is kind as opposed to the truth.
People can actually handle the truth. Like patients can handle you not knowing every answer. Patients can handle you looking up information and getting back to them. Patients can handle lots of things as long as you're telling them the truth. Actually, if you're shifty and uncertain that way, like they're like, oh my God, like this doc doesn't seem sincere to me, that's going to be so much worse, right?
I was feeling a lot of shame. And I believed that shame to the point that I acted it out with my behavior. I saw what was happening, I had that moment of awareness, and I was like, I have no solution here. All I can do is hide.
Hello, my beautiful friends. My name is Dr. Beck.
And I am Christine Barker, and this is Am I Doing It Wrong? A podcast for doctors by doctors. Every week on the pod, we'll be bringing you conversations which shine light in dark places, normalise the doctor journey, ease unnecessary suffering, and give you actionable steps to thrive in all facets of your life. So grab a cuppa and get cozy for this week's episode of Am I Doing It Wrong? The podcast for doctors by doctors. Hello, Dr. Humans, our beautiful friends. Welcome back to the poddy. And we have some questions for you just to kick off. Dr. Humans, I want you to really think about this and truly the first answer that comes into your head, how would you respond to these scenarios? So you're with a patient in clinic and they ask you a question about their condition and you don't know the answer. What do? After that clinic, you go to your ward round and you're with your registrar who's just about to become a consultant. So they're like a really good registrar and you think they're probably judging you for all the things you don't know. And they ask you a question and you don't know the answer to that either. What do? And what about if you're giving a presentation? You're giving a talk on something, you're meant to be an expert on that. You know, you've been invited to give the talk. Someone asks you a question at the end of that and you have no idea how to answer it. What is your response? And then what if you make a mistake, right? What if you make a mistake at work, a mistake with your schedule, something's gone wrong? What is your first response? Do you want to open up and tell everyone what exactly happened? Or do you feel like you might want to come up with a bit of an excuse, maybe a little bit of a cover-up situation? And we want you to really be honest with yourself today and no judgment at all, because today we're talking about that temptation to pretend and to, I guess, be something you're not in a moment because it feels hard to not pretend sometimes. So we're going to be unpacking this, and we're going to start off with a little story first of all, with Beck. So Beck, tell us a little bit about this. Has been coming up for you a lot in your life experience. So tell us about your recent time when you felt like you really wanted to pretend, and how did you show up in that moment?
Oh my goodness. You know, actually, I've just had a bit of a reality check over the last couple of weeks because I've brought this to my awareness after I have just finished filming our final immersive for this year, which is the Unaffected by Others immersive. And in that immersive, there is a whole module on people pleasing, which, as you guys know, is one of my bread and butter topics in Dare Darling. And I've spoken about it in a different way than ever before. And a really big part of people pleasing that I identify as part of the problem is actually lying and choosing instead the hard thing of telling the truth. You know, that's what's really under people pleasing. And getting that out of my head and getting that so explicitly into this module, it gave me personally, a new lens to look at my life. And outside of situations of people pleasing, over the last couple of weeks since I've sort of gotten that out of my head and into this course from the filming, I've been acutely aware and purposefully looking for all the places in my life that I still don't sit fully in my truth. And the way that I justify this is the same way that we justify it as people pleasers. We tell ourselves that the lie is kind as opposed to the truth. We convince ourselves that we should people please. We should tell a little lie, a little white lie in this moment because it's the kind thing to do for the other person. I've had this incredible experience over these last couple of weeks. Incredible, but also really uncomfortable over the last couple of weeks of seeing all these little moments of white lies in my life, and even just little lies to myself about whether I want to do this thing or don't want to do this thing, or how I'm going to explain this certain thing. So let me give you a couple of examples. So firstly, I guess yesterday, Christine, you mentioned speaking up and being honest, particularly for us as doctors, about our knowledge, about how much we do and don't know. We had one of our quarterly board meetings for one of the boards that I'm on yesterday. Went up in person, had my professional clothes on. I was ready to contribute and make a difference and be my biggest professional self. And then I'm sitting in this meeting amongst all of these capable, competent, more experienced people than me, particularly in this industry, in this space, and just in board work. And so many times over that day, I was humbled by recognizing that I didn't know a term, or I didn't quite understand a context for something that we were discussing, or I didn't understand even how to begin to frame a question to get the answer, to get the understanding of the situation that I needed to get on board with the topic, because there are so many gaps in my knowledge because I'm new to this space. And that temptation that you were talking about, Christine, to hide that lack of knowledge it just kept coming up again and again. And each time, even though, I did a couple of reps of just asking the question anyway, just saying and sometimes speaking out loud, even though I didn't even feel like I could really formulate the question that I wanted to ask because I needed more context, I still had to sort of cheerlead myself into it each time, because those thoughts were there that were judging me, that were telling me, you should really know this. I was saying to one of our Dare Darling members the other day, this is one of those thoughts that doctors have, right? I should know this. I should know this. I should know this by now. How common is that for doctors? And that was coming up in this context for me, and it was making me want to pretend. And time again in this meeting, I had to choose something different to what came naturally to me. So I just want to offer that situation for everybody, particularly for me, recognizing that it isn't something that you just decide once, particularly if you practice pretending, you practice perfection, you practice people pleasing your whole life. It's not something that you just make a decision about once, but even in the same setting, you might need to do it again and again and again and again, and pep talk yourself into being willing to not pretend and try not to be perfect in that moment.
Oh, it's such a relatable thing, the pretending. And oh my goodness, it was just, everything was coming up for me because I was actually thinking about other experiences I've had in similar situations where maybe giving a talk, and I've invited people to the talk and they're at the talk and I'm talking about a specific topic that I've spent ages trying to learn about. And that feeling of like, I have to justify my existence by answering this question. And so the current version of me, like you say, works to choose another path, which is, I don't actually know. Does anyone else on the call actually have something to contribute here? Or I'll look that up and I will get back to you guys later. I'll find that out and I'll email you. That's my response now. But interestingly, that's actually because I did choose the other path. I did try and pretend to fill in the blanks and fill the void of not feeling enough, I think was ultimately what it was. And I think that was actually a really negative experience. So although in the moment you might reach to pretend because you think it's going to be the answer to your fight or flight response that you're clearly experiencing in that situation, it actually doesn't soothe anything. It just makes you feel like a giant fraud. And actually, I don't know. I think like it's the reason that I then chose another path, because I had to like reflect on what, oh my God, like what did I just do? And answering that question, I was rambling. I felt like I confabulated. It was so out of my integrity, but it was almost like forced in the moment. So I just feel like it's so relatable to be in that situation where the construct of what are these people going to think of me, and just the fact that you're doing something like you're in this board and you're showing up, you're new to this stuff, and equally it's like you're a young person, but you're also like mid-career type thing, like you, I guess, and amongst all the people you're with, their vintage is probably a lot higher than you as well, isn't it? They've got more experience, they've been on the board longer, but yet here's you feeling like I'm on the board, therefore I'm supposed to show up in a certain way. But I just think it's interesting. So can I ask you, you're showing up and you're choosing this differently, like did you ever pretend? Like, can you think of it? Like me?
Did I ever pretend yesterday or in general?
And years gone by, and like, because I'm wondering if it's a product of like once you do this and you let yourself down basically by the pretense. It's like it hurts me to do this. Then I learned I need to be a different way, and I'm going to need to learn to own this fact that I don't know everything, because I'm never going to know everything and it's impossible. And I guess I just wondered how you became the person, or what experiences you had that made you show up that way yesterday.
My earliest memories of this are in medical school. I think when I was in, traditional school, there was a pretty preset curriculum, and whatever I didn't know, I could just go and work out myself. In medical school, however, there was that kind of fire hose situation of here's all the information you have to learn, and there was not time for me to go home and do my perfectionistic, like, I'm just going to go and work this out myself in private. I realized that if I wanted to learn as much as I wanted to learn and grow with that, I needed to be willing to ask questions in the moment that I wasn't particularly proud of, questions that I'd rather just go and work out myself. And also I knew I could go and work out myself, right? Like it's not that I didn't think I was capable of it. So all I needed to negotiate with myself in the moment was the most efficient ways for me to ask the question right now. And the other offer is that I could go home and figure it out in private, and then I could keep feeling smart and clever and like I was self-sufficient. Or I could ask the question in the moment, potentially look dumb in front of my peers, potentially, have people just look at me a different way in general, potentially have this question that just came to my mind reveal something about me that I wasn't necessarily aware of or proud of. And having to make that decision in the moment back then, that was really a question of, choosing my values over how other people perceived me in that moment. And that was a pivotal thing for me that made me incredibly proud. It was more important to me in that moment to be somebody who did what was the greatest good, did what was most productive and effective in the situation, rather than potentially being perceived as looking like I didn't know what I was doing, or like I was dumb to my peers, or like I wasn't following things along, right? And so that was just a really nice moment for me of making a values-based decision rather than one that was
I'm laughing because I wanted something more like juicy and dirt filled. All right, tell us about a time when you weren't perfect.
Okay, here come the good stories, guys. So Christine, when you were talking earlier, you touched on the fact that what creates this temptation to pretend to be perfect, or to pretend so that you can please the other person, is that actually what's happening is you have this shame, this guilt that comes up in the moment. Like for me, sitting there in that board meeting, when I recognize, I actually don't know how the Australian government is structured. I don't actually know what an MP specifically does and doesn't do. I can't name the cabinets, and like something prompts a situation. That awareness comes to my mind, and all those thoughts that follow it that make it a problem for me are thoughts like, you should know this by now, doctors. Similar thoughts are, this is really basic. This is something that you should have known earlier. If you're sitting here in this position, doctors, if you're sitting there in front of a patient and they ask you a question, you don't know the answer, it's so easy for you to think, to be sitting in this position, I should really know the answer to this basic question, but I don't. And what happens in that moment is you feel shame or some similar emotion. And when you feel that shame, it's such a powerful, compelling emotion that is so easy to believe it. And let me tell you how that got me stuck, pretending, and out of my values in a very recent situation. So I have experienced many humbling situations throughout this pregnancy, including my brain not quite functioning in the way that I'm used to it functioning in just really bizarre ways, guys. Like I am usually I'm a calendar blocking person. I'm super organized. I'm the kind of person who plans out everything on the calendar the week in advance, or at the very minimum, the day before I'm off to work, I know what I'm doing the next day. I can just glance at my calendar before I finish work and it's all clocked. With my pregnant brain, I will do that same practice, the same practice that's kept me organized and on point and professional my whole life, where I will look at my calendar and then for some reason, the next morning when I wake up, I have no register of that normal event that I would do. I have no idea what is going on, what is coming up in my day until I actually go and look at my list of things to do. With that, I host this peer support meeting that we recently changed the time of. And a couple months ago, I slept through this meeting. I slept in and I totally missed the meeting. That was my sleepy pregnancy brain. And I was so good to myself, guys. In that moment, I had all that self-compassion. I recognized this doesn't make me a bad person. Yeah, I feel really bad, but things happen. We're all human. I was doing the thing. I was compassionate. I was good. Then 2 weeks ago, I was awake. I was walking around my house. I was getting on with the day, my pregnant self, doing my work. And then it occurred to me about 15 minutes after this meeting ended that I did not attend the meeting that I was hosting. And I had no idea what day or time it was. I don't know where I was mentally in my head, but I was not in the place that I was meant to be. And I really intended to be in this meeting. Again, I clocked it the day before when I'd looked at my calendar. Not only that, but I had my other filming events that I was doing during that period. And I specifically did not put my filming on that day because I had that meeting that was going to block out a part of that filming day. So I was like, oh, I really, really want to film that day, but this meeting's important, so I'm going to do that. I had all the intentions to do it, and it didn't happen. And apparently, I had reached my compassion level for myself at that point. I had passed the threshold where I could no longer find compassion after this being the second time that I'd missed this meeting that I committed to, that I was doing for this other organization, right? I was doing it for somebody else, and I had let them down. And I had no compassion left for myself after doing this, not once, but now twice. The thoughts were like, you didn't learn from the first time. The thoughts were like, you just mustn't care that much, right? The only explanation here is that you're actually just really selfish. I told myself, it's not just your pregnancy brain. You haven't missed other things in your life that are really important. You haven't missed any of your own coaching calls in your own business. You haven't missed any of your obstetrician appointments. So it's because you're selfish. It's because this is for somebody else. And you obviously just don't care enough. You don't have enough respect. And if you guys can imagine, with those thoughts, I was feeling a lot of shame. And I believed that shame to the point that I acted it out with my behavior. I saw what was happening, I had that moment of awareness, and I was like, I have no solution here. I have no way forwards. All I can do is hide. And so I didn't email the team. I didn't email the founders of the program and tell them what happened. That would have been my usual behavior, to be like, oh, this happened, just so you know, FYI, so you can get on top of it in case anybody missed out. Or do we want to proactively email these people and let them know, sorry, I know you signed up for this meeting, but it didn't go ahead because blah, blah, blah. I didn't do it because I was hiding, because I was acting out that shame. I was like, you're a shameful person. There is no way out, no solution to this. And it's just frankly unacceptable. Hiding myself mentally from the fact that it happened was the only solution in that moment to my brain full of shame. And then the next day, no less than 24 hours, the founders emailed me and they were like, hey guys, did the meeting go ahead? What happened? And all that shame came back. I realized in that moment when they emailed me that I'd managed to escape the shame. I'd managed to avoid my emotions. I had that heavy heart at the start, but I'd managed to distract myself, do the thing that most of us do with our emotions. Just distract ourselves and compartmentalize and move on with our day. They emailed me and all that shame came straight back. And from that place, my brain just started trying to concoct lies. It wanted me to pretend so bad that this didn't happen. And I was thinking, oh, maybe I could say, this was my initial reaction, maybe I could say that, I was there, I was on the meeting, but nobody came. Maybe there was some kind of link mix up. Maybe I could say that my internet didn't work. Maybe I could say that, I don't know, insert some technical difficulty that didn't have anything to do with the fact in my mind that I was a terrible person and I just didn't care enough. And I don't know what stopped me. I don't know if it was this work that I'd been doing over the last couple of weeks of, actually recognizing how detrimental it is to me and my relationships, but really to me, to be pretending in my life and wanting to be, like back in med school, making that decision of being that values-based person. But for whatever reason, something came up in me to just tell the truth. And I'd even started trying to write this pretending lie in the email, and it all felt wrong. I deleted it and I just started with, I'm so sorry. Here's what happened. And I just told the full truth. To be honest, I didn't feel any better at the time. I hit send and then I just walked away, kind of like, rest in peace. Anyway, let's go. Professionalism, it's out. It's all out in the world. You're somebody who can't even get organized to attend a meeting. It's over. Like, let them do their worst with you. You are no longer a part of this organization. I got an email back from one of the founders that day from one time zone, and then another the next day from a different time zone. And they showed me for the first time in this whole situation that I was just believing the shame. The only explanation that I could come up with was that I should feel shame in this situation, right? And that's why not only did I want to pretend, I wanted to pretend to be perfect, I wanted to pretend in some way that would please people. I was so deep in the lie of the shame, the lie to myself that what I did was shameful and that I was a shameful person, that I couldn't see any other alternative explanation. And when they emailed me back with that compassion and that understanding of what happened, that was honestly the first moment that I could even consider anything other than the idea that I was just a terrible person in that moment, because I was just living in the shame, believing the shame, and I did not take the time to question it. Their responses that had a totally different perspective of me shook me out of this lie that there was anything to be ashamed of in this situation. And this is just one of the benefits of telling the truth. Because when you pretend because you're feeling shame, you're buying into the shame. You're doubling down on the shame. You're doing exactly what the shame wants to do. You're not questioning it. You are investing in it. You're believing in it. And just that, the very moment that you choose to tell the truth about something you're ashamed of, the very moment that you decide this is not something that I need to pretend in, this is not something that I need to lie about, this is already you acting as from the antithesis of shame, because shame says hide, right? The truth says, telling the truth about your situation says, I do not need to be ashamed of this, i.e., I can share this, right? And notice how if you keep acting out the shame, you never get to see that alternative. You never get to prove the shame wrong, right? So this was my vulnerable story, and I think, you know, there are two main takeaways that I want to offer you guys. When you notice that urge to hide, I want you to just question if shame is there, lurking, if shame is the reason that you want to hide, that you want to pretend, that you want to please. Is it shame under there? The best cure for shame is to do the opposite of what it wants you to do. Shame it drives you to behave in a way that you hide and withdraw. And if instead of hiding and withdrawing, you tell the truth in that moment, you're already fighting back against the shame.
Yeah, and I think there was so much power in your story as to the internal experience of like how when we tell the truth in order to dissolve the shame and basically shine in light in dark places, which is what we're all about, right? It's like when you shine the light on it, it just doesn't exist anymore. It's such a dark little thing, shame. It's a horrible feeling, shame, and no wonder we want to get away from it. But I think the other thing that's just true here is that people can actually handle the truth. Like patients can handle you not knowing every answer. Patients can handle you looking up information and getting back to them. Patients can handle lots of things as long as you're telling them the truth, actually. If you're shifty and uncertain that way, like they're like, oh my God, like this doc doesn't seem sincere to me, that's going to be so much worse, right? And same with your junior team. Like if you have a junior person on your team who is judging you for not knowing something, that says a lot more about them than it does about you, because when they get to your stage and they realize they don't know everything either, it's going to be a very humbling day for them too. And that's just how it is, right? And so I think it's like the pressure we put on ourselves to be a certain way and show up a certain way, and then that shame we feel when we don't quite meet that standard is also, it's actually interesting why it's there at all, because the truth is that no one really expects that from us, or they shouldn't expect that from us, because it's just not a realistic expectation. And so I think, yeah, and the thing about your meeting is such a vulnerable share. So thank you so much for that story. But it's just something that we can all relate to. It's just having a calendar blip or a little brain fade, and there's a lot of moving parts. Life has a cognitive load to it, whether you're pregnant or not pregnant. But it's just, and I feel like women everywhere who've had the pregnancy brain situation will just be like cheering you on, Beck. But I think it's just that it's true on both sides, right? It's like it benefits you to be authentic and not pretend, and it benefits everyone else involved. It's actually magic. And it's interesting that when you say it out loud like that, it's kind of fascinating how we ever showed up, or we continue to show up and risk behaving in any other way apart from our authentic expression. It's actually fascinating.
I just love what you said about how it's the right thing for the other person. And I think that's what I'm realizing over the last few weeks of having this new level of awareness and really being in integrity for this again as a very purposeful thing for myself, that telling the truth, I can easily see how that is the most respectful thing I can do in any relationship with somebody I care about. You know, we honor people by telling them the truth, and it's such a dishonor to not tell them the truth. It's like as you said, do we think they can't handle it? Do we think that they would judge us so harshly? You know, that's it's funny. I have a little chuckle thinking about how I was worried that these founders would respond to me in the way that I was treating myself, because it's just not the kind of people they are. The way they think about me, as you said, it's a reflection of them, and they're good people. They don't assume the worst, whereas my brain was assuming the worst of me. So I think it's one of the most beautiful things we can do in our relationships. It's also a very important thing to do in terms of setting expectations for the relationship. You know, it's a slippery little slope of saying yes to things, the little white lies that say, yeah, I'd love to do that with you, or yes, we should catch up next weekend, or yes, I'll do that task, no worries, doesn't burden me at all, it's not something that I don't want to do, no, let me do it. And yes, in the moment, those they're pretty inconsequential. But when you're doing this in a relationship, professional or personal, you're setting yourself up, you're teaching the other person about you with everything you say yes and no to. And so while the little white lie in that moment, the pretending, the pleasing, the projecting this perfection might seem like it's a harmless little white lie, but we've also got to think about ourselves in the future and that relationship. And I think I like to think that I honor my friends by telling them the truth. I honor my friends and my loved ones by telling them the truth, even if it's not what I am predicting they want to hear in the moment. But also respecting them enough to allow them to have whatever emotional response they have to it, whatever response in general they have to it. Respecting them enough to know that they can handle that and they can feel negative emotions and they'll be okay because they're self-sufficient, brilliant people. And also to holding the belief that they'll keep loving me because they're not judgmental people. My brain is afraid that they'll judge me and reject me and I'll lose all my friends and loved ones. That's why my brain wants to people please. But I'm not giving my friends and loved ones enough credit if I'm believing that. And just because my brain goes to that critical place, it's not fair to project that onto my loved ones. So yeah, I think it's telling yourself the truth so you can tell other people the truth is the best thing you can do for your relationships, both professionally and personally, and in the short term, but also in particular in the long term.
Yeah, I love that. And then I think just circling back to those questions we asked you guys at the start, just after listening to us and maybe reflecting on some of your own experiences, sort of past, present, what would you do in those situations and how would you show up with the benefit of this conversation? So we love you all. We hope that this really brought some sunshine to your day. It's always great to dig into a bit of dirt with Beck. That's my favourite part. But she's so perfect all the time. I love her. And we hope that you've enjoyed this episode and we'll see you again very soon for another poddy ep. See you next week.
See you guys.
I've been waiting all my life for something. I've been down the darkest roads and up